Before reading part 2 of this story, let's review what we know so far. Roger is in the 3rd grade at St. Jeffrey's, a small, private school in New York City. He's a nice but not terribly bright boy who loves school because it's all fun and games. His teacher, Miss Wilson, a fun and games teacher, had to leave for a while. The replacement teacher, Ms. Orville, is an older, retired teacher who's mean, strict, and does not play games. She talks to parents and students in the same gruff manner. When last we read, she told Joseph Lambert's mother, in front of the other mothers, that he watches too much television at home and his homework suffers as a result. Nancy Reeves, Bruce's mother, kept staring at the retreating figure of Ms. Orville, by now far down the block. "I know her from somewhere, I'm sure of it," she insisted, shaking her head. The next morning, Roger refused to leave for school. "My shoes aren't shined," he wailed. "Not what Miss Awful calls shined. Where's the polish? I can't leave till I do 'em over." "Oh, Roger, if only you thought of it last night," sighed Mrs. Clark. "Oh, you sound like her," he cried. "That's what she'd say." And it gave his mother something to puzzle over the rest of the day. She was still thinking about it when she joined the group of mothers outside St. Jeffrey's at 3. She had to admit it was sort of impressive, the smart, martial air exhibited by the 3rd grade as they trooped down the steps. There was to be an additional ceremony today. The ranks waited on the sidewalk until Ms. Orville passed back and forth in inspection. Stationing herself at the head of the column, she boomed, "Good afternoon, boys and girls. Let us return with perfect papers tomorrow." "Good afternoon, Miss Orville," the class sang back in unison, after which the ranks broke. Taking little Amy Lewis in tow, Ms. Orville once more nodded to the mothers. "Which is she?" she asked Amy. Ms. Orville approached the trapped Mrs. Lewis. She cleared her throat, thrust back her shoulders. "Amy tells me she is fortunate enough to enjoy the services of a full-time domestic at home," said Miss Orville. "May I question whether she's fortunate or deprived?" "I needn't lecture you, I'm sure, Mrs. Lewis, about the wisdom of assigning a child tasks to perform at home. Setting the table, tidying up one's room, are lessons in self-reliance for the future. Surely you agree?" There was a nod from Mrs. Lewis. "Excellent," smiled Miss Orville. "Amy will inform me in the morning the tasks you have assigned her. Make them plentiful, I urge you." The lecturing, however, was not ended. Turning from Mrs. Lewis, Ms. Orville cast her gaze around and inquired, "Is Roger Clark's mother present?" "Yes," spoke Virginia Clark, reaching for Roger's hand. "What is it?" Ms. Orville studied Roger silently a long moment. "A scallywag if ever I met one," she pronounced. The rimless spectacles lifted to the scallywag's mother. "You know, of course, that Roger's a prodigy," said Ms. Orville. "A prodigy of misspelling. Roger, spell flower for us," she ordered. Come, speak up." Roger kept his head lowered. "F," he spelled. Flor. "Spell castle." K, Roger spelled. Kazl. Miss Orville's lips parted grimly. "Those are the results, mind you, of an hour's solid work with your son, Mrs. Clark. He does not apply himself. He wishes to remain a child at play, absorbed in his toys. Is that what you want for him?" I... Virginia Clark would have been grateful if the sidewalk had opened up to receive her. As she reported to her husband that evening, she had never in her life been as mortified. "Spoke to me in front of all the other mothers in loud clarion tones," she described the scene. "Do I want Roger to remain a child at play? Imagine." "By the way, where is Raj?" Mr. Clark asked, who had come home late from the office. "He's not watching television or busy with his airplanes." He's in his room doing over his homework for the 98th time. It has to be perfect, he says. But really, Charles, don't you think it was outrageous? Mr. Clark stirred his coffee. I bet Miss Orville doesn't get down on the floor with the class or do Mexican hat dances with them. Ugh. If that's meant to disparage Miss Wilson, Virginia Clark stacked the dinner dishes irritably. She sometimes found her husband's behavior maddening, especially when he took to grinning at her as he was presently doing. She also concluded that she had her fill of Elizabeth's attitude on the subject. At least some teachers wised up to Raj, had been the Clark's daughter's comment. He's cute and all, but I wouldn't want to be in a shipwreck with him. Washing dishes in the kitchen, Mrs. Clark considered that maybe tomorrow she wouldn't meet Roger in front of the school. Maybe she'd wait around the corner instead. His shoes, she gasped and hurried to remind her son to get out the polishing kit. The spelling, too. She better work on that. It was on Thursday that Nancy Reeves finally remembered where she previously had seen Miss Orville. Perhaps it was from the shock of having received a compliment from the latter. Mrs. Reeves, I rejoice to inform you of progress, Ms. Orville had addressed her after the third grade had performed its military display for the afternoon. On Monday, young Bruce's penmanship was comparable to a chicken's, if a chicken could write. Today, I was pleased to award him an A. A tug on the tweed jacket and the stiff-backed figure walked firmly down the street. Nancy Reeves stared at her until Miss Orville had merged into the flow of pedestrians and traffic. I know who she is, Nancy suddenly remarked, turning to the other mothers. I knew I'd seen her before. Those old ramshackle buildings near us on Hudson Street? Remember when they were torn down last year? The other mothers formed a circle around her. Miss Orville was one of the tenants. Nancy Reeves went on. She lived there for ages and refused to budge until the landlord got a court order and deposited her on the sidewalk. I saw her there, sitting in a rocker on the sidewalk, surrounded by all the furniture and plants. Her picture was in the papers. Elderly retired school teacher. They found a furnished room for her on Jane Street, I think. Poor old thing, evicted like that. I remember she couldn't keep any of the plants. On the way home, after supplying a lurid account of the day's tortures, Miss Awful made Roger Mead stand in the corner for saying a bad word. Roger asked his mother. Eviction. What does that mean? It's when somebody is forced by law to vacate an apartment. The landlord gets an eviction notice and the person has to leave. Kicked her out on the street. Is that what they did to the witch? Don't call her that. It's rude and impolite, Mrs. Clark said as they turned into the brownstone doorway. I could see your father and I have been too easygoing where you're concerned. Huh? We got worse names for her, Roger retorted. Curse names. You should hear them. We're planning how to get even with Miss Awful. Just you see. He paused as his mother opened the downstairs door with her key. That's where the cat used to sleep, remember? He said, pointing at the corner in the entryway. His face was grave and earnest. I wonder where that cat went to. Hey, Mom, he hurried to catch up. Maybe it was evicted too. Then it was Friday at St. Jeffrey's. Before lunch, Ms. Orville told the class, I am happy to inform you that Miss Wilson will be back on Monday. She held up her hand for quiet. This afternoon will be my final session with you. Not that discipline will be relaxed, but I might read you a story. Robert Louis Stevenson, perhaps. My boys and girls have enjoyed him so. 46 years of 'em. Joseph Lambert, you're not sitting up straight. You know I don't permit slouches in my class. It was a mistake to have told the children that Miss Wilson would be back on Monday, that only a few hours of the terrible reign of Miss Awful were left to endure. Even before lunch, recess had a certain spirit of challenge and defiance had infiltrated into the room. Postures were still erect, but not quite as erect. Tommy Miller dropped his pencil case on the floor and did not request permission to pick it up. So what? He mumbled, when Ms. Orville remonstrated with him. What did you say? She demanded, drawing herself up. I said, so what? Tommy Miller answered, returning her stare without distress. Roger thought it was neat of Tommy talking fresh like that. He was surprised, too, because Miss Awful didn't yell at Tommy or anything. A funny look came into her eyes, he noticed, as she just went on with the geography lesson. And when Tommy dropped his pencil case again and picked it up without asking, she said nothing. Roger wasn't so certain that Tommy should have dropped the pencil case a second time. The lunch bell rang then, and he piled out of the classroom with the others, not bothering to wait for permission. At lunch in the basement cafeteria, the third grade talked of nothing about except how to get even with Miss Awful. The recommendations showed daring and imagination. We could beat her up, Joseph Lambert suggested. We could wait at the corner till she goes by and throw rocks at her. We'd get arrested, Walter Mead pointed out. Ooh, better idea, said Bruce Reeves. We could go upstairs to the classroom before she gets back and tie a string to the front of the door. She'd trip and break her neck. She's old, Roger Clark protested. We can't hurt her like that. She's too old. It was one of the girls, actually, who thought of the plant. That dopey old plant she's always fussing over, piped Midge Fuller. We could rip off all the dopey leaves. That'd show her. Roger pushed back his chair and stood up from the table. We don't want to do that, he said, not understanding why he objected. It was a feeling inside he could not explain. Let's just forget about it, he said. Let's call it quits. The plant, the plant, Midge Fuller squealed, clapping her hands. Postures were a good deal worse when the third grade reconvened after lunch. Well, you've put in an industrious week, I dare say, Ms. Orville commented. She opened the frayed volume of Treasure Island, which she had brought from home, and turned the pages carefully to Chapter 1. I assume the class is familiar with the tale of young Jim Hawkins, Long John Silver, and the other wonderful characters? No, I ain't, said Tommy Miller. Ain't? What word is that? It's the word ain't, answered Tommy. Ain't, somebody jeered. Ms. Orville lowered the frayed volume. No, children. You mustn't do this, she said with force. To attend school is a privilege you must not mock. Can you guess how many thousands of children in the world are denied the gift of schooling? Her lips quavered. It's a priceless gift. You cannot permit yourself to squander a moment of it. She rose from her desk and looked down at the rows of boys and girls. It isn't enough any longer to accept a gift and make no return for it, not with the world the shape that it's in, she said, spectacles trembling on her bony nose. The world is not a playbox, she said. If I've been severe with you this past week, it was for your benefit. The world needs good citizens. If I have helped one of you grow a fraction of an inch, if just one of you... She stopped speaking. Her voice faltered. The words dammed up. She was staring at the plant on the windowsill, which she had not noticed before. The stalks twisted up bare and naked, where the leaves had been torn off. You see, Ms. Orville said after a moment, going slowly to the windowsill, you see what I'm talking about? To be truly educated is to be civilized. Here, you may observe the opposite. Her fingers reached out to the bare stalks. Violence and destruction. She turned and faced the class, and behind the spectacles her eyes seemed dim and faded. Who's ever responsible, I beg of you only to be sorry, she said. When she returned to her desk, her back was straighter than ever, but it seemed to take her longer to cover the distance. At the close of class that afternoon, There was no forming of lines. Miss Orville merely dismissed the boys and girls and did not leave her desk. The children ran out, some in regret, some silent, others cheerful and scampering. Only Roger Clark stayed behind. He stood at the window, plucking at the naked plant on the sill. Miss Orville was emptying the desk of her possessions: books, pads, a folder of maps. "These are yours, I believe," she said to Roger. In her hand was a water pistol, the baseball cards, the spool of string. "Here, take them," she said. Roger went to the desk. He stuffed the toys in his coat pocket without paying attention to them. He stood at the desk, rubbing his hands up and down his coat. "Yes?" Ms. Orville asked. Roger stood back, hands at his side. He lifted his head erectly. "Flower," he spelled. Flower. He squared his shoulders and looked at Miss Orville's brimming eyes. "Castle," Roger spelled. Kastle. And then he walked from the room.